Greetings and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, January 10th, 2022. Let the record reflect, call the meeting to order at 6:30. All councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Berman, who's been excused this evening. And that brings us to the Pledge of Allegiance. We would invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4 of the agenda, there's no general information. That brings us to item 5, committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence at this time? Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the Dyer Library and the Saco Museum, we want to thank everyone who volunteered, sponsored a tree, or came out to see the exhibit, and also who purchased raffle tickets for the auction. 2021 was a huge success after being gone for a year. The day of the light parade, we had over 600 visitors that day. The gift shop had to be restocked twice due to it being sold out, and that the art tree generated 3 times the revenue from 2019, all items that were generously donated by local artists and craftspeople. We're already looking forward and planning for 2022 and hope to see you all there.
Thank you. Any further committee correspondence to council? Moving on to item 6, public comment. There are 2 folks that have signed up for public comment this evening. First up, we have Jane Karen. Please come forward, state your name, address for the record, and present your...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Jane Karen. I live at 264 Lincoln Street here in Saco, Ward 5. So on my notes, I have breathe, because I'm not a public speaker and I have to take a breath. I am not going to stop speaking, and I have to get used to that and practice, if you would allow me. Public comments first and public hearings. I've spoken to a lot of citizens, even just this week, in our city, asking them to attend public hearings, come to the meetings and share public comment. And many of them ask whether there's an option for those Zoom meetings as previous during COVID. So I explained to them it is in person or via email, and I asked them please to communicate with that way. So I just want to let you know that, as you know, people's voice is very important. And I'd like the council and the city to again consider, with the level of COVID, families, busy families and children's schedules, traffic and disabilities, everything, if there is any other methods to be able to participate in public comment and public hearings. In addition to the emails. So a hybrid option of Zoom, possibly. I don't know where that went, so please consider that. Second on my list is in regards to the draft comprehensive plan, and specifically the proposal to extend the downtown district to include Maple Street, Lincoln Street, Forest Street, and on up to Boom Road. I share these thoughts with you out of respect for all of the work the city council members do, the planning board members, the planning department, all other city staff departments that work hard on these type of things. However, this area that is proposed is the same area that affected the very neighborhood in that neighborhood that spoke out the past 2 years regarding their residential neighborhood and what might happen to their residential neighborhood. In addition, many citizens from other neighborhoods and wards continue to speak up concerning the infrastructure of our city, specifically traffic, schools, the sense of our beautiful city, and the rate of growth and development in our city, including residential development, downtown, and so forth. Excuse me. The sentiment is the City Council and others need to please revisit the comp plan in the next, in another 10 years when it's up again, and not take action as proposed in this comp plan, to remove that segment of extending the downtown district at this time. And that is for the City Council, the Planning Board, departments in the city, whoever needs to hear this. The citizens have been consistent with their voice, and if necessary, it will need to become louder if that's what it takes. No disrespect. It's not a threat, I'm just saying. And I thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Up next is Kelly Archer. Again, please state your name and address for the record and present your comments to the City Council.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Nice seeing you all again. I'm Kelly Archer. I live at 185 Bradley Street. I am a former appointed ZORS member and HPC member, and I'm a current member of the Save Saco Neighborhoods Facebook group page. I am here because I, too, echo everything that Jane just said. I am concerned about the map on page 81 of your packet that includes an expanded portion of the downtown district. That was a 2018 discussion proposal from the planning department, and I have historical knowledge. I have distinct notes. This was 2017, 2018. It was for the TIF. It was never a discussion to make the downtown district an expanded zone. It was a TIF to help the downtown district. So the fact that this is looking like in your packet that it is a change in that zone, I vehemently disagree and do not want that to happen. As we all know, last year, there was a very concerted effort to not change the density or the height of Ward 5. And again, I'm from Ward 5. We were very much in agreement to MDR, a 35 height for that one parcel. And I do believe that this extended zoning of the district, the downtown district that's in the proposed comp plan, draft 1, I do believe that that was never the intention, to get it back up to 50, 60 feet. That master plan wanted to get to a year and a half, 2 years ago, a year ago. We all know the story. So I am also concerned that last year there has been a turnover in the city. I've been here my whole life. We all know my past history, my family's past history. I've never seen it the way I've seen it in this past couple of years. The transparency that we need, the due process that we need, the level of input that we need to be heard. We need due diligence. We need everyone to read every page. Don't skim, look at it, because certain things are being slid back through again. And I don't want a repeat of what happened in 2017 in November, April of 2018. I can go on and on and on. So as far as Zantec, I'm sorry, do I have an extra time, or I will be happy to stop?
No, go ahead and finish.
Thank you. I believe Zantec is a great company to do what they're doing with the comp plan. Absolutely in favor of it. I don't know how this part of the map to expand this area should have happened or why it's there. I need you to really consider taking this thing out, having more discussion. And I'm also concerned, again, I've been off the radar. 9/21, I believe, was the date, was the master plan development, that you had a 6-month moratorium. What has happened to that? Are we addressing that? Are we addressing the capacity of the schools? I'm going to get back involved to find out what has been going on and what we can do to improve the quality of the city of Saco. And I also want to comment and to Marshall, disclosure, my son. He came to me as the chair of the HPC over a year ago to come to our meeting, and for him to speak, to have all commissions and all boards to have an open public comment on all of their agendas. The planning board needs that. The conservation, you ran on transparency. You ran on due process. I do believe that needs to be out there. And is the planning board now being videotaped? Is Andrew Dickinson doing that like he did? Is that continuing? I don't know. I have not looked, but I will. We need to have that on record. And again, just please perform your due diligence in the 2013 revised comp plan and the 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21 discussions encompassing this area. And please reconsider to stop this at the railroad tracks. That's been the conversation. That is the historical knowledge. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. If there's anyone else who would like to address the city council, please come forward and be heard. Seeing nobody seeking recognition, moving forward to item 7, there are no minutes to approve. Brings us to item 8, consent items. Item A, confirm mayor's reappointment to the Economic Development Commission of Mike Eon. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Thank you again, Mike, for serving your community for another term. Brings us to item 9, action items. We have 3 items on tonight's agenda. Item A, a final reading, Chapter 175, Senior Tax Assistance Program. Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. City staff have identified that there were not enough appropriate positions within the city to continue to support the senior work-off program. To ensure our most vulnerable residents can remain in their homes, this revision to Chapter 175 provides a match to the main property tax fairness credit and a bridge to implementation of LD 1638, which is an act to help seniors and certain persons with disabilities remain in their homes. The City of Saco hereby ordains and approves the second and final reading of the Chapter 175 revision.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Archer. Discussion? Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. I was hopeful we could have an opportunity to speak with our finance director. I just had a few questions about content.
Finance Director Salas, would you join us at the podium? Thank you very much.
Yes, what questions can I answer?
Good evening.
Good evening.
And first of all, I want to thank you for responding to all those questions that came up at last week's meeting from one of our constituents here in the city. Did a nice job of answering all those very thoroughly. I have to admit, I'm still struggling a little bit with, in my own head, in terms of how the chronology of this is going to occur. So, and part of my confusion is the year 1, and I understand we're trying to do something in the moment to take care of some folks, and then moving forward to subsequent periods. Could you just quickly give me a snapshot of how you see this process working, particularly in year 1, this year that we're in?
Certainly. So for year 1, We set initially a deadline for applications to be submitted to the Finance Department of February 1st. That was back when we thought the first reading was going to be in mid-November. So certainly any counselor, if you'd like to amend that deadline to February 15th, that would give us a little bit more time to reach out to the community. Understanding that, whether it's the 1st or the 15th, that the application deadline will be in February. The expectation would be that successful applicants have paid their first half taxes for fiscal year 2022 in full, and that they did receive a property tax fairness credit authorized by the state of May for the taxes that were due April 15th, or rather, I believe it was extended to May 15th in 2021. So we'll be using the 2021 deadline, which would have been for 2022. So let me rephrase that. So for the 2020 filings will be used to validate the property tax fairness credit amount. And we'll be looking at successful applicants who have paid their first half fiscal year 2022 taxes, so the ones that were due in September in full. So 2020 filings for the credit match, taxes paid in full through September 2021. We will then apply up to 2 times the credit they received for their 2020 filings against their second half tax bills. If that credit exceeds the amount of the second half, we will issue a check for the difference, essentially giving successful applicants a credit back on their first half taxes. If 2 times the credit exceeds the total amount of taxes paid, then we won't give them more money than what they pay to the city. So then the credit match would be a little bit lower.
So you're working off the 2020 federal tax return,
Yes.
state tax return.
Correct.
All right. And then moving forward, for this upcoming year, we'd be working off the 2021 state tax return.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So theoretically, the folks who would be applying within whatever deadline we set should, in effect, have the evidence, the source document we need to
Yes.
verify that they've received the state credit.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, then that makes sense to me, which means that the time that we allow for this deadline should be reasonable enough to allow people to not only be aware that the program is available, but then to actually complete the application form. Now, is that application form ready to go?
We do have some draft forms, and we're working with Brunswick, which has a very similar program. In fact, I think our legislation was drafted based off of their ordinance. And they have forms, so we would probably borrow from them. I do have the new Deputy Finance Director, Megan Levine, working on that, and she knows that it's set to be likely approved this evening, and to kind of get everything ready pretty quickly. I know I had heard from administration that there's a plan for a mailing or something like that.
Yeah, I'll just add that I've already met with our communications director about a comprehensive strategy on getting this out to the public, not just via online, social media, web, but also through paper, mail, and that sort of outreach to some people who may not be online.
Good. I think that's very prudent, so I appreciate that. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but theoretically, whoever wants to try to qualify for this has the documentation they need in hand. They just need to fill out the application form
Yes.
and then submit it by that deadline that we establish, and then you'll be able to verify whether or not they're eligible for any credit on our end. Okay, that's much clearer to me. And moving forward, it gets easier because you're just using the completed tax form.
Yep.
Now, we will have folks who maybe don't file a tax return because they don't have sufficient income, but they can file an informational return that will enable the state to determine whether or not they are eligible for the credit. So we have to try to be sensitive to that as well. And I know that we have, because I'm the liaison to Age Friendly Saco, they have tax preparers in that organization that work with the elderly to assist with their tax returns. And I think we should take advantage of that opportunity to broaden the scope of contact moving forward. So that does clarify one point for me. And just let me review my notes. So if I look at the section 175-4, the application and credit procedure, the second paragraph indicates that as part of the application to the city, the applicant shall, and it currently reads, shall authorize the city to seek documentation from the main revenue services. But really, what we should be saying is that the applicant shall provide the city with proof, because they have it. They'll have a check, or they'll have some sort of verification from the state. So I'm just trying to save you a step. I think we put the onus on the applicant to give you the source document you need. And as a result, we don't need to be authorized to go get any information from the state. So I just throw that out there, and maybe there's more to the story than what I've just spoken about, and if there is, then your language may be appropriate. I think keeping the focus on the applicant to give us something that they should already have can really expedite and streamline the process.
Yes, so the reason that language is in there is that if an applicant does pay income taxes in the state of Maine, their credit amount will be netted against the taxes that, excuse me, the credit would be netted against their return or against the amount that they owe the state, depending on how their withholdings have been throughout the year. And so the 1040 ME, which we would receive with the property tax fairness credit amount calculated, is an applicant amount and may not represent exactly what the state of Maine has distributed. So that's the reason that we do want to at least get permission to validate. Of course, with the expedited timeline between, let's say, a recommended deadline of February 15th and the property taxes due March 14th and wanting to get the credit applied before the taxes are due, we may not have the ability to get a full review and confirmation from the state. But under the normal calendar year for this program, it's a good best practice just to let the state review that information and verify that indeed that is the credit amount that was distributed to the applicant.
And then I'm also somewhat concerned about the fact that we've kind of, because of COVID, we kind of skipped a year, right? We had some folks working off because we had jobs for them. We had others that didn't have jobs that were qualified to have jobs. So I'm not sure we've made any provision for those folks in this whole process. And please enlighten me if you have. I'd like to hear what that is.
Yes, so unfortunately, we've reviewed this with the city attorney a couple of times, and the state of Maine legislation under which that program is built does require that any tax amount distributed to participants in the program be directly correlated to the amount of time worked. So we can't provide any special consideration to applicants who would have qualified in that program year, but were not able to complete their hours. Our hands are tied by state legislation in that regard. But that is why we did offer in year one of this program up to 2 times the match, so that we were sort of giving, taking into consideration those who didn't receive something that prior year who might have, we're giving them a little bit extra to help cover that gap.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I'm happy to hear that the communication is going to be ramped up. And then I would like to, I'm not quite sure, Mayor Doyle, how this can work, but I would like to include in my motion to amend that date from, which is in
So you'd like to make an amendment to section 175-4
-4.
to change the date from February 1st of 2022 to to February 15th of 2022.
That is correct.
Is there a second on the amendment?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion on the amendment? Amendment only. Councilor Archer?
Recognizing COVID's in place and where we're at, is there any legal reasons why we couldn't do it just to March 1st, like, we'll just call it February 28th, give them to the exact end. If we take into kind of a time frame, if we're taking about 2 weeks just to get the communication out there, that would only give elderly citizens about 2 weeks to get all their documents and to get transportation if needed. So I'm almost thinking, would March 1st be, or whatever's easier for you, the 28th of February or March 1st, would there be any benefit to doing that? And is there any negative side if I was to amend it to the 28th or 1st?
The 28th is just a little bit tight. If people wait until the last minute to submit an application and we need to go back and forth with them, we're trying to turn around the credit application before the property tax due date of March 15th. It's just a very tight turnaround for our team. And, you know, I mean, that would be the challenge.
Because I'm only thinking
getting
it for
in.
this year only, just because of the very last minute vote on this.
Right, right. We will certainly do our very best if the council wants to move that deadline all the way to the 28th. I just think we would be challenged to like have reviewed everything and get it into the system. It's just the first time we're doing this. We don't know what the forms will look like. We don't know how readable they'll be in terms of reaching out. So there's just, we're pushing it real tight to when the taxes are actually due. There's the potential of people getting worried they're not going to get the money and then paying, and then we have to rebate. So, you know, I would prefer to have a little bit more time to make sure we get the paperwork piece of this right and get the amounts right.
But we do give to our citizens, applications not deemed complete by July 1st shall not be considered, so that technically means we have till June 30th for the program administrator to make a decision.
No, so the July 1st application is then, needs to be processed and applied before the first half tax due bill. First half taxes, which are not typically due until the second Friday of September. So that's giving us a runway of about 2 months to process applications. So to go from 2 months down to 2 weeks. But if the council really wants to push this deadline to the 28th, then we'll work to try and get it applied. It's also just difficult in terms of staffing. I'm sorry. Because of the foot traffic in City Hall, I don't have as much administrative support in the department at that time because there is so much paperwork being processed. So it would just be more difficult for our department to get everything pulled together. We want to make sure the numbers are right. There might be just more corrections after the fact, potentially. I mean, 2 weeks is enough time. We'll just have to be very cognizant of not having any competing priorities in that time frame if we're going to be implementing a program for the first time in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Finance Director Silas, in this first year, if somebody comes in past the February 15th deadline, you're not going to turn them away based upon the initial passing of this policy.
I think we'd be flexible. I mean, I would hope that everyone would get at least some application into us, right, by the 15th, so that we then have a comprehensive packet to review and to follow up with people. I don't think, if the deadlines for complete applications is the 15th, we can be more flexible on incomplete applications. If it's the 28th, we really can't be flexible with incomplete applications or people coming in late. We're going to have to really make a firm cutoff.
Thank you. Further questions? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. City Administrator Kanath, I know you're flush with staff, you've got all kinds of people, but that's just a joke. But if there is a pressure on the department, I don't know if you could consider,
We will make it work.
Yeah,
We're not gonna
deploying
leave
somebody.
We're not going to leave anyone out in the cold. We will make it work.
I appreciate
and We'll
that.
do the work necessary to get this up and running in year one. So we'll make that commitment.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions on the amendment? On the amendment only, to change the date? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Amendment passes 6-0. Back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? Roll call vote on the main motion as amended. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Main motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It brings us to item B, one reading, a marijuana opt-in resolution, and that is Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the request of the Planning Board, Saco planning staff seek input from councilors to define the scope and goals of a potential zoning amendment for regulating marijuana businesses. The board's request and opting in to authorizing adult-use marijuana businesses in Saco was discussed during the December 13th, 2021 City Council meeting. The next steps decided upon during the discussion were for the council to vote on a resolution affirming its commitment to opting in or not, and for councilors to participate in a survey exploring their perceptions of what is best for Saco on this matter. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss and vote on the associated resolution. If a clear majority of councilors resolve to authorize adult-use marijuana businesses in Saco, then an ordinance for doing so will be developed by planning staff and the planning board for review by City Council and the public. If a clear majority of councilors resolves to continue prohibiting adult-use marijuana businesses in Saco, then further zoning amendments will be limited to refining regulations pertaining to medical marijuana businesses, such as caregivers and registered dispensaries. The City Council resolves to authorize adult-use marijuana businesses to operate in Saco following discussion and adoption of a separate ordinance to be drafted and recommended by the Saco Planning Board.
Motion's been made by Councilor Purdy to accept the resolve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Discussion. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. So I think I kind of spoke at length about this back on December 13th, and not much has changed in my opinion. You know, I think it was that night, had just passed the medical marijuana ordinances. As a community, we've yet to see how those new uses and availability impacts both those zones and the community at large. So, I mean, to me, without an understanding of where we are with that, it kind of seems, I mean, I don't really see a compelling reason to do so. I mean, as prior speaker tonight indicated, there's, in my opinion, much more pressing land use issues before this council, the planning board, comprehensive plan, you name it, that are long-standing, that go back several years that we haven't addressed. And I think taking up our time, taking up the planning board time, taking up the planning department's time with, you know, for a lack of better terms, where people can find their smoke, it seems like a waste of time to me. At this stage, I mean, we may indicate later on that we, you know, when we have more knowledge of what's out there, come back to this. But right now, opting in and then finding out the language, again, it just creates more work. At this point, like I said, I think that we just keep it as is, and we can opt in later if we so choose. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Hatch?
I'm going to weigh in agreement with Councilor Johnson. I think that I've been a little ambivalent on this myself, but I think that a little wait-and-see attitude could really be beneficial to the community. I appreciated the content of the packet from the planning department. I was intrigued by the chart that gave us some insights as to how other communities in the state of Maine have reacted to allowing marijuana uses in their municipalities. And I had to do it the old-fashioned way and count, but there were 95 municipalities on that list, and it was pretty much an even 50-50 split as to which of those municipalities allowed retail marijuana sales and those that did not. And I'm wondering, and some of them are fairly large, and they're nearby. Biddeford is one, Scarborough is another. I even saw that Kennebunk had also not allowed it under their ordinance. So it sounds like, to me, I guess you could read into that maybe the wait-and-see attitude is permeated through some of the other municipalities as well. So my vote will be leaning towards not opting in.
Thank you. Councilor Archer, then Councilor Purdy. Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to dissent on this one and actually support this. I believe, again, this motion will not draft any ordinance. It still has to go through a legislative process. It can still be voted ups and downs and lefts and right by the council. However, what this will do is give clear guidance to the planning board on where we stand. So I will be voting yes on this. Whether, again, we're not defining what it means. That will be done through legislation, through us. And in that case, I will be voting yes, and then I'll bring up the merits and locations and all that when it comes down as an ordinance.
Thank you. Councilor Purdy?
Thank you. Just to piggyback on Councilor Archer, agree with everything he just said. And as I said, I believe it was, excuse me, December 13th, adult use is legal in the state of Maine, and I don't have a problem with a legal business operating in the city. The ordinances that are drafted by the planning department or the planning board can decide on location and how many, and council can tweak it to its desire. So I'm in favor of this. I'll be voting yes. Thank you.
Councilor Gunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To piggyback on Councilor Purdy and Councilor Archer said, and also from my own perspective on this is kind of philosophical. The voters of Saco voted with the majority of the state to legalize adult use marijuana. It's been a long time coming in terms of getting the particulars down first, the medical business, then the recreational business. Now, we as a council have taken upon ourselves to, along with the planning board, to regulate very finely medicinal marijuana and where they can go and where they can't go. Now, some folks might say that because they basically, the medical were here first and they've pretty much taken up all the practical space of where medical marijuana would be in the city, then why even bother with recreational at this point? Wait and see how medicinal does down the line for a business. I'm of the opinion that if we were to vote tonight to opt in formally, as is required, to have adult use marijuana, it would settle the issue, and no longer would people to say, you know, Saco's prohibitionist on this one way or the other. I mean, whether or not Saco voted or not, the state voted, and Saco just happened to be on the winning side of that, though. But be that as it may, if we were to vote this through, even with our current ordinances, probably it's not practical for it to have recreational use in the city, just in terms of where things are. So it's not like we're going to get a rush of a whole bunch of businesses when we already have the medicinal businesses. And even talking with someone who was in the medicinal business, they said, you know, recreational is really not on their radar. I mean, in fact, they may sort of see them as somewhat of a competition, since we've obviously talked up about here that aside from getting yourself a marijuana card, it's really, the difference between the businesses are really more semantic, you know, in the vernacular than anything else. So, as I said, just to get it off the table and say as a city, yes, we have no problem with recreational marijuana businesses. However, down the line, we can go through it, like Councilor Archer said, get to work the particulars, and it may not even be practical for someone to have a business of that kind in the city for quite some time. But just to get it off the, you know, instead of kicking the can perpetually down the road, we can simply say yes or no to it, then work out the particulars later. And if the particulars aren't to any potential business owner's liking, then they can do their business elsewhere. But at the same time, just to have it taken care of, so we then work out the particulars, especially considering this ping pong between, you know, planning board make a decision. No, we want guidance from the council. No, we like, it's, you know, the old buck stops here, and we can put the issue tonight, but rest tonight, and work on the particulars at their leisure. And the planning board, yes, that we do have they have a lot of things on the agenda, but the city has a lot of things on its agenda, and this has been one of those third rail issues that I think we should put to bed tonight. And it's definitely not a hot priority for the city at the moment, but just to have a clarity the planning board requested of us, I think it does our diligence right to, you know, put this through, and I would be inclined to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gunn. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. While I agree with some of the comments my fellow councilors have made, certainly voters of Maine voted for this, but part of that law is the ability for municipalities to opt in, and I believe, or I would surmise, that the thought behind that by those that passed this law was we, being this elected body, would probably have more of an understanding of what our municipality wants than the state. That's what I'm thinking anyway. And I sit here before you with not a clear understanding of what this community wants. You can refer back to a vote that occurred years ago before laws have changed. Marijuana is readily available as is. Yes, you have to take an extra step to get it, but it's readily available. So that changed drastically since that vote. So again, to me, this seems backwards. We're being asked to opt in tonight and then come up with this ordinance. If we choose at any time as council, we can have ordinances drafted, we can have those meetings, we can have surveys, we can ask the public. I think it would be a great opportunity to put up, as we've done with some of the zoning revisions, put up maps and ask the public, where would you like to see marijuana uses done? Because we've never done that to date, ever. So we're basically making it up ourselves as we go. And what I have found, and I said it several weeks ago, I'm indifferent about this use. I personally don't care. As somebody that lives in a high-density area, I smell marijuana on a regular basis. Me personally, it doesn't bother me, but I do know, having spoken to other people, they have strong feelings towards it. So again, I have issues where we're going to move forward with something, understanding that it's going to go through a process. But the concern I have is that once you remove this opt-in, we opt in tonight, there's no turning back. That's my understanding anyway. And that's been my concern all along. We can opt in the same night that we have an ordinance that we've drafted and gone through the meetings, then opt in. Right now, you opt in, it's ticking. I would argue that there's plenty of skilled attorneys out there that are going to say you've already opted in. You are forced to at that point. And I don't like at any point as a city councilor feeling like my hands are tied. I think much more communication with the public needs to happen before we just say, oh, well, they voted for it. Because again, the conversations I've had, even back in 2016 when we took the vote, people just wanted to make marijuana less illegal. There wasn't much thought about how it was regulated. And that's the concern. Now we're being forced to regulate it. More conversations I've had, as we've seen recently, well, it's pretty clear most don't want it on our main street. Well, there's other areas that they might not want it too. And having forced all the medical into the industrial parks, what are we going to pack the whole thing with marijuana uses? I don't think that's a diverse community from a business standpoint. So again, I think you're just better off, as a council, as a body, we can move this forward, creating motion or creating ordinances at any time. We don't need to opt in first. So if that's, the will of the majority, then do that opt in once we've crafted and figured out and heard the public, not force ourselves into having to adopt something. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out that tonight's vote is not going to be opting in. Read the motion. It says the City Council resolves to authorize an adult-use marijuana business to operate in Saco following discussion and adoption of a separate ordinance to be drafted and recommended by the Saco Planning Board. My understanding of this is that we are simply voting on a resolution to tell the planning staff and the planning board which direction we need to go. If the council votes no on this, then no more work needs to be done on this, and it's a done deal, or for at least another year anyway. But if the council votes is simply a resolution saying, yes, this is the direction we want to go, and that would give the city staff and the planning board the direction to start working on those policies. This, to my reading, is not an opt-in tonight. I understand there probably are lawyers who can argue it. Lawyers will argue everything. That's what they're paid to do. But for that reason, going on the premise that we're not actually opting in, we wouldn't opt in until we actually passed the zoning ordinances that would be recommended by the staff and the planning board. And those ordinances are going to have plenty of time for public hearing and public comment as well as it goes through the planning board process. And then once it gets through that, it's got to go through the city council process. So there will be ample time for public input during the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Garner, would you come down and join us at the podium, please? Director Garner, thank you. The question has been posed now a couple of times here. Tonight's resolution does not fully opt in or does fully opt in for the council?
It does not. It's an advisory vote, if you will, for myself, my staff, and the planning board to decide whether we should work on this any further or not. The state statute explicitly states that opting in requires an ordinance for that purpose. And this is clearly not an ordinance. It's a resolution, which is a specific action that you can take.
Thank you.
I prepared that resolution with input from the city solicitor, so I had some help.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question. Thank you. Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just was going to pretty much just double up on what Councilor Purdy said, because I too read it as a resolution. The way I interpreted it was that we were authorizing using city resources to explore this even further. And resources include time, includes many different things other than cash. But I looked at it as direction. I even started it that way, as its direction.
Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. I would agree. I read it as a resolution. The problem we've had and we've seen is that certain attorneys out there have implied previously that we've opted in through just leaving our zoning the way it was. So again, to try to avoid lawsuits, I think that if you were to just skim this and read initially, marijuana business opt-in, most people don't know what a resolution is out there, so I think most of the public would think you're opting in too. But again, that's just my concern. I don't think the city planner needs a resolution from the city council. It's a simple, yes, we're interested in crafting some ordinances, and we direct the administrator to do that, and that would come forward. But, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Archer?
Again, I think for any concerns from legal lawyers trying to come after us, this is a resolution. They are professionals. They know what resolution means. So I don't see any legal liability when we are drafting a resolution in this matter.
Any further discussion? Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess part of this is, yes, and again, I did read it as a resolution as well, but the point is, why, if it's not a benefit to the city, why put our city staff, the planning department, the planning board, council's time and effort to creating the ordinance? This is not a benefit to the city. The city gains nothing from this. We provide medical for our residents in the community that need it. It's there for them. The adult use, it's going to increase our traffic flow in areas where we don't need it. We have more pressing issues that we need to address before we can take this into consideration. At this point in time, as I stated, basically the main thing is this is not a benefit to the city financially or as a community.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Purdy.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Councilor Berman couldn't be with us tonight, and it's a pretty weighty issue, and I'd like to have the entire council here when we do actually take a vote on this. So at this point, I'm going to make a motion to table until our next meeting.
Councilor Purdy's made a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn on the motion to table. Councilor Archer?
one second before we take a vote. I'm going to our rules of order real quick, the amended version that we use. Okay. I cannot find it, but possibly another counselor would know what I'm talking about. Is when you have again, I think council, my interpretation is 3-3 at the moment. It's my interpretation of, I'm trying to remember the exact rule, but if a counselor who you know is to vote yes, and we did get an email from that, that a no vote votes on his behalf. In this case, Counselor Burnham's behalf.
Councilor Archer, I don't believe that we've ever done by proxy voting.
It's in here.
In all my years on council, that's the reason why the mayor is the tiebreaker for ties on different matters. So I know what the language you're looking for. I've seen it before, but given that Councilor Berman shared that email, if you now use it, you are opening yourselves up to liability because that is discussion, not at the dais. So I would encourage you to either table or go along using the tie-breaking method that's in the charter and the rules and order of business with the mayor.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
No.
Councilor McPhail?
No.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
On the motion to table, the vote is tied 3-3. I am going to also say no on the motion to table and break the tie. Therefore, we are back at the main motion. The main motion. Any further discussion? Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
No.
Councilor McPhail?
No.
Councilor Johnston?
No.
It's a tie. I am going to break the tie with a yes vote. So the motion passes 4-3. Resolution. Thank you, Director Garnham. That brings us to item C, a comprehensive plan update. Councilor Purdy, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. After more than a year of data collection, public meetings, and online engagement, the city's consultant has prepared the first draft of Saco's updated comprehensive plan. Saco's comprehensive plan establishes the basis for making strategic city policy, project, and budget decisions by articulating a vision for the future and outlining the goals, objectives, and strategies to achieve it. It also provides the rationale and legal support for zoning, impact fees, and other regulations that guide or restrict development in the community. To facilitate this, the plan articulates goals and strategies that are to be implemented via decisions made by city staff, the planning board, and city council, within timeframes which reflect the community's expressed priorities for the future. City staff will present an overview of the draft plan and land use map for discussion, a public hearing for review of the A public hearing for review of the draft plan is currently scheduled for January 18th Planning Board meeting. Ultimately, a revised draft plan will be forwarded to the Saco City Council for review following a positive recommendation by the board.
Thank you very much. At this time, you'll see there's no motion. We're not voting on this tonight. This is just an update. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Director Garnham, the Planning Director, to take us through an update on the comprehensive plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, as you all know, the comprehensive plan has been under development for over a year now. And the last time you, the City Council, discussed it was on October 18th when the city's consultant provided a presentation that included an update on the findings from the various meetings and stakeholder engagement avenues that have been pursued, and provided a presentation of the main themes and the big takeaways from those strategies. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is essentially to unveil the first draft of the comprehensive plan that we staff received a few weeks ago and have been having a look at. Now, this is a draft plan, and I wanted to bring it up as an advisory to say, please, it's going to be your comprehensive plan, so please review it and its appendices when you can. And also, I wanted to highlight a few of the kind of the main issues. I don't want to bore you with a detailed presentation. There is going to be one at next week's planning board meeting. That is a public hearing. And then additionally, that plan will be going through the legislative process following a recommendation from the board. Whether the board makes a recommendation at next week's meeting or not, I don't know, of course. But so this is not the last you will see of this by any stretch. So the two main items I really wanted to bring up, one was already mentioned by a couple members of the public. We received comments on a wide variety of elements of the plan, but I'd like to call your attention to page 81, which is the draft land use map. Now this map, among other things, does include a potential extension of the downtown land use area, and several residents and members of the long-range planning committee and the council have expressed some concerns about that section of the potential downtown area that extends west of the railroad tracks. So that is something that I suspect you or the board will be deciding on, whether it remains in its current configuration or not. Just a real brief summary overview. I believe the reasons that area is currently included within the downtown area is essentially that area is perceived to represent the best opportunity for supporting the existing downtown via new development, investment in infrastructure, pedestrian facilities, bike facilities, those kinds of things by virtue of proximity and lot sizes and so on. There are certainly cases to be made that potential extensions of the downtown area could be appropriate in other places or not appropriate at all. That is a conversation for you to have during your upcoming public meetings. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up. It's one of the things that I've heard the most about over the last month or two of this effort. I do want to point out one other thing about that before I move on, and that is that I do want to remind everyone that the land use map is distinct, separate, different from the zoning map. There are no changes to zoning being proposed in this comprehensive plan effort. So I've heard various perspectives on some of the zoning challenges that have occurred within that neighborhood and others, and I want to say there is nothing in this plan that directly changes the zoning. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that distinction, and I'm happy to talk off the record on what the differences, the broad differences between zoning and comprehensive planning are. The other thing that I wanted to bring your attention to, maybe because it's more important to me than some others, but are the goals and strategies that begin. Well, they're presented in a couple of different forms within the plan document, but they're summarized in a matrix that begins on page 91. And the reason I wanted to call that to your attention is that that is the portion of the document that translates the priorities that staff and our consultants heard during the engagement process and during the research process regarding the community. That's where we've translated those things into action items that are to be taken by staff and by you all when we make decisions in the future. There are a lot of goals and strategies in that plan, many of which are assigned to your planning department to implement, and I would remind you that we are not a large office. So I do appreciate any critical review of those goals and strategies, not just as they relate to the planning department, but to the city as a whole, because I think it's very important that we recognize that we're not going to achieve all of the goals and strategies in that matrix, and if we want to achieve any of them, we need to really clearly understand which ones are your priorities. So if you have anything to say on that going forward, we definitely want to hear it. That's all I really have to say. I am happy to answer any questions, and again, I want to encourage you to, advise your neighbors and constituents to participate in the upcoming hearings and meetings, and we do continue to run the online engagement, so if anyone has comments they'd like to add, there are surveys, there are methods for submitting letters, and we do keep and track all of those. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Director Garnham? Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Mayor Doyle. First of all, just a high-level comment. I've read this from cover to cover. It's very well done. So I think lots of interesting information in there, well laid out. I, too, was drawn to page 91 and started reading the plan, because I've been involved in a lot of planning efforts and ideas and concepts, and really devil's in the details. And the strategies that are outlined there are pretty intense, and I got tired just reading them, so I can't imagine, to your point, we're going to need to come up with either a combination of staffing resources and or priority schedules. And I'm just going to go on record, because I'm part of the group, that I've played on a lot of successful athletic teams. This is a team effort, and I think as counselors, myself included, we need to get involved, and then we have departments here that have been identified as having to take a lion's share of the workload. So I'm in. I just want to, I would fail in my duty to my constituents in Ward 5 to not publicly address the comments that you just made. You and I have had conversations, so I appreciate that. This whole boundary issue is a serious one. My phone is already starting to ring off the hook, and I've encouraged those who contact me that I would represent them as their ward counselor, but they need to also show up at events like this evening. We had two members from the public. We've got a planning board public hearing next week. There'll be a public hearing when it comes to the city council. So I'm being very respectful and agreeable to your point that if that boundary is going to change, it will change because the citizens of the city want it to change. It's your comprehensive plan. So step up. And when we had to deal with this issue, we worked hard in that ward and, to get to an MDR designation for that site. We had 150 some odd signatures on a petition. Those 150 people need to speak up. They need to come to the public hearings. They need to let the council know. They need to let the planning department know in some way, shape, or form. So I make a public plea to those folks to do so. So good job, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with this plan. Thank you.
Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Councilor Hatch actually kind of took the words out of my mouth there. Having gone through the update process that we undertook a few years back and the zoning revision process, and then hearing feedback after the fact, I'm in the same camp as far as, if it's your comprehensive plan, it's your zoning ordinances. If you feel a certain way, you need to make yourself heard. I don't know how this particular map was drafted, I wasn't involved, but I do know that the addition of what is, commonly referred to as the Kimball land, that came out of, as Ms. Archer said earlier, out of the last comprehensive plan update process, where we had an economic development director that highlighted that land and figured, let's put it in the TIF district, because if it's 60-plus acres of undeveloped land, something was going to go there, that made, potential sense for TIF monies to be utilized. But again, we did pull it out of that prior plan. I have enough knowledge to know with all these comprehensive plans, they're kind of all reread, a lot of the same ideas are adopted and then carried forward, so that could be it. I mean, when I look at the map and having familiarity with zones, I see the expansion of the downtown zone into at least three new zones we just formed, and from where I sit today, I see issues with that, but I also understand that this is a guide, whereas, if we approve this plan tomorrow, the zones don't change. We still have to go through subsequent processes, and it's kind of saying, hey, over the next 10 years, potentially, if you're going to extend the downtown zone, this is the areas you would do it. It doesn't handicap us or tie our hands to it. But again, it's always beneficial to hear from people to see how they feel, because I've always said it. I don't like operating in a vacuum, and at times I feel like I do, which is why I always try to ask people, just even as fellow counselors, you're out and about, ask them how you feel on an issue. Oftentimes I'm surprised, so same with this. I know it's 130 some odd pages or whatnot, but read it over and give feedback to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Director Garnham? Director Garnham, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too. That completes the action items for tonight's agenda. Brings us to item 10, new business. Item A, acceptance of deeded land, Oceanside Drive and Shore Avenue. City Administrator Kenrath.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Mayor. You all see in your packet the informational materials. Basically, we were approached by neighbors down there. The path that's used to access the beach at the head of Shore Avenue along Oceanside Drive, which has been used as a beach walkway for approximately the last 100 years. The actual ownership of the land is a little bit sketchy as far as something concrete as far as who actually owns the property, and so the owners would actually like to deed that walkway section area to the city as a gift. This came from our city attorney. He's not here this evening, but if there are specific questions for him, I can relay those, but he sees no major issues here. And this will be us acquiring, not giving up, as with some other issues, beach access for our public, our citizens.
Thank you, City Administrator Kenrath. Any questions from the council? If not, you'll see this on an upcoming agenda. And I'm going to assume that Councilor Berman would like to be the liaison and just assign it to him. With that, that brings us to item 11 of the agenda, and that is the administrative updates. City Administrator Kenrath.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To follow up on some of the conversation and comments on our council meeting archives, minutes, and packets, we had talked about hyperlinks a little bit at our last meeting. I did have some conversations on that. From a website management perspective, there was some concern about heavily relying on hyperlinks in long-term records, and the links will likely not exist statically forever and could become broken and therefore unreliable. After further discussions with our city clerk, Michelle Hughes, we will begin attaching the packet to the minutes with the links as it operates now in your packets. It will be all within one document and should be easier to navigate for most of you and members of the public. We'll try that out and take further feedback. There are also some questions about how our meetings are being stored. We archive our video files in the following ways: physical media in City Hall, backups through the city's IT department, and also YouTube storage. And we do not currently have any concern about accessing video files stored on the platform, but keep a close eye on any changes that may happen. With YouTube, we also additionally record live meetings redundantly, so we have a backup recording available should we experience a hardware or software failure during a meeting. So any further questions or comments on that, please let me know. But we're trying to improve the process and obviously make things more transparent and easier for the public and you all to navigate. A brief update on the Campaos Army Corps of Engineers project. We did receive an update from the ACOE that they are on track to be providing us with revised cost estimates and a framework for a PPA. They said by the end of the month, but I'll say in the coming weeks, so it seems relatively on track for us to hear something back in a concrete manner from them to further the discussion, hopefully get things going there. I did talk today with the city's Parks and Rec Director, Ryan Summer. Tomorrow is forecasted to be some bitterly cold temperatures, and we are going to be opening the rec center as a warming center for anyone who may need that from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and all are welcome at our Franklin Street Community Center tomorrow during the cold temperatures. Wednesday is supposed to be back to more seasonable conditions up in the 30s, so we're anticipating it will just be for tomorrow, but we will play that by ear and wait and see, and this will pertain to any other extreme cold days for the balance of the winter. Parks and Rec, in light of the closure of the Saco Middle School, you may have heard beginning tomorrow through next Tuesday, January 18th, due to COVID, the Saco Parks and Rec Department will follow the school department's lead and also be suspending all middle school programming for the next week to return next Tuesday, January 18th. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator Canarath. Any questions for the City Administrator? Moving on to item 12, council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment this evening? Okay, moving on to executive session. There's no executive session. Brings us to item 14, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Purdy. Any discussion? Roll call to adjourn. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 at 7:42. Have a great evening, everyone.